Again, good afternoon, everybody. Joey Connect, senior leader with Proteus. We're based out of Lincoln, Omaha area in the great state of Nebraska. Um, but today's topic is modern onboarding lifecycle, why never one and done. And so, obviously, popular topic, as I mentioned, with how many individuals like yourself signed up. And we're going to kind of talk kind of candidly how things have really changed in the last couple of years, and is I from our company's purview going to continue to expedite or expand in this is that onboarding typically was a one and done experience, right? So you would work really hard getting a new client, spend a lot of time in your sales, right? Customer acquisition costs, and then yay, we secured the client, and then you're like, now it's time, we're going to onboard them into the ecosystem. But a lot has changed. And there's many factors to that. And so we're going to go through some of those factors and some of the whys around that. And then going to talk about kind of some approaches basically on how to tackle these problems where you can't tackle it all at once, but definitely you can apply these to your team pretty much immediately. I would hope immediately. Now, one kind of demarcation line. Obviously, we have a wide variety of companies, and so some of you today are SaaS companies or project-based companies, or even different kind of verticals and industries. So some of these concepts, you might not have people, for instance, like customer success. You might be like, we have nobody from customer success on our team, or you might be like, we don't we don't really have onboarding. We are the onboarding is done by the sales team. Or so there will be some titles talked about here, but don't get hung up on sales, onboarding, CS. It's more about the ultimate goal of acquiring a new customer, getting them to their desired goal, whether that's a project you're executing, setting them up in a SaaS product or whatever, and then of course keeping them and growing them and scaling them more long term. So don't get hung up on, well, we're not this or we're not that. It's more the overarching approach and strategy that is kind of the key takeaway from here, because many of you, depending on the enterprise, are wearing multiple hats, and this becomes even harder when you're wearing multiple hats, right? And so just keep that in mind and give grace to that as we kind of go through these elements here. So, all right, so let's get started. So the big shift. So the big shift in onboarding. So I kind of talked about it. And typically what was going on and had been going on is ultimately you would, as I mentioned, your BD team or sales would go out, secure a new project, secure a new SaaS customer, secure, new whatever you might be doing. And then they would be handed off real quickly, maybe poorly, handed off, then to kind of getting them, air quotes, set up live or project started. And so that ecosystem was pretty common, and it was a one and done. And God forbid somebody had to go through onboarding again, that would be deemed we did something wrong, right? And so what has happened though now is the political climate, the business climate, the just in general the climate around B2B is that many of these services, projects, products, everything is now being heavily phased out. And so we'll give a couple of examples. So if you're a professional services company on the line here today and you're over the age of 45, you're going to remember this. You used to be able to sell something for 500 grand, and they would sign the line that is dotted, and you would onboard them once and take them through the project and be done. Now that same project is maybe broken up into 6 distinct projects, and in many cases 6 distinct onboardings, right? Big challenge to the organization. So everything has been broken up in that ecosystem. If you're on the call today and you are a SaaS kind of company or products-based company, you have now changed your entire model from selling the customer once and giving them everything, all the pieces and the modules, to module-based selling, module-based onboarding. And so that same customer, you might be deploying it only to a specific division of the company or department within the company, and you might do 7 to 10 additional onboardings throughout the actual one client experience, right? So the big shift is in everything is becoming much more broken up, whether it's again professional services, SaaS, or anything. So you're repeatedly onboarding, right? Nonstop onboarding. Now, for you, some of you that might be 2 times a year or 3 times. It can be even more for others. So just the concept of onboarding um, does not equate to a one-time transaction, nor is getting the customer live actually mean anything. And I'll talk about that because we joke about that in our own company. Getting a client live is yeah, that's good, but they have to hit their returns, what they're trying to achieve. So we're going to unpack that a little bit more here in a couple of minutes. But the big shift overall is that it used to be kind of a one and done, get them through onboarding as fast as possible and move them to account services or CS if you're a tech company. But now onboarding is mission critical continuously in the client lifecycle. So I'll start with that. That's the big shift. You're probably seeing it. That's why more than 300 of you signed up for today, is because this is becoming a big problem for organizations. Now, it's not only a big problem because you have to do it multiple times, which is difficult in itself. You're not the only one involved. You also want to involve people from sales and involve people from leadership, and of course, maybe people from account or CS if you have all of those roles. If you don't, I know some of the names that came through here. I'm not going to say it, but I know some of you who are current clients who are on this one, plus prospects, is that you are wearing many hats, and so you might be all three of those roles. And so, how do you effectively do this overall? All right. So it's not going anywhere. Everything is becoming more broken down and service based or service line based. And of course, if you're selling into mid-size or enterprise, you're going to be starting with simple or divisional sales or team sales. And then from there, you're going to have to scale up and just keep onboarding more and more folks. All right. I think I beat that to death enough that you're like, Joey, I got this. Move on. So I'm going to move on. Um, this slide is in every single presentation. And so the reason why I bring this slide up is there's another layer to the problem. The first layer, as we talked about, multiple onboardings. The second layer that is a gigantic pain and threat is that the number of people you have to work with to make this achievable, number of stakeholders to make this achievable, the number of people that need to be involved to make this a success each time is getting larger and larger too. So you have more people and every one of these onboarding. So you might onboard that first group, then you're onboarding the second group, third group, fourth feature, and the people just keep getting larger and larger and larger, and the number of stakeholders larger and larger and larger. So you have a stakeholder problem also, and just a scale problem. The number of people involved in each one of these onboardings just will continue to rise and repeat, rinse and repeat, rise and repeat. So there's two layers to this problem. And again, for any of you on this call that are selling into companies north of 50 million in revenue, which would be in America considered a small business, that's somewhat of a problem. As you get north of 250 million in revenue, it is a definite problem. So anything north of that, you're going to get into a lot of consensus and just a lot of stakeholders. So it's double compounded. You have to onboard the client multiple times, and then you also have to service them across a larger group over time to obviously meet their goals of each division or team or anything like that. All right. So I think you're probably self-reflecting and you're there. So this is a brief summary, basically, of what I just said. Again, you'll get this deck accordingly at the end. But for many of you, this is the problem. So clients are now don't trust anybody. They've been burnt enough or haven't met the expectations of their um, goals that they set forth. So everybody wants to tippy toe. If you're in software, you call that maybe even a pilot or a trial or certain things like that. If you're in professional services, it's a get to know you project. That is a kind of a smaller project just to kind of test are we qualified for getting married, or should we just date and break up after a short period of time? And so this overarching lack of trust, missed expectation management, alignment disconnects, everything. The average customer now wants to manage that risk as much as humanly possible. And so they're using these strategies to do that, to which, of course, for you as the service provider, requires you to do a lot more in the concept of onboarding and obviously getting them successful in hitting their ROI numbers. All right. So that's the pressure. That's the driver of it. But you now know that. I'm not saying you didn't, but you now know that. So how do you counteract that and create a life cycle process that meets the needs of the customers, but also is repeatable and scalable by your team, right? Because this is you're the one greatly affected by this change, and it's not going to go anywhere. The customers are going to continue to push. We even see this even getting more micro in certain industries, literally. Like they're buying a single seat, or I mean, it's like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And so your costs, you have a high sales cost, and then you now have an onboarding cost, and now you need to onboard the client 5 times. I always joke, you better make sure in your proposals you realize that when you're talking with your other partners and execs, that you're able to say, hey, you know what, boss, I just want to make sure you understand the way that you sold this. I'm going to have to onboard the client 5 different times. Some of you are laughing, some of you are crying. Hopefully I'm just not crying, laughing. Tough crowd always, these webinars. All right, let's continue on. Amusing myself. Okay, so I mentioned this earlier in the presentation. Thank you. Very nice comments. Why go live means nothing. So frequently in any kind of onboarding experience, they're like, the go live date is, we'll make it up, August 1st. All right, yeah, go live date is August 1st. Go live date August 1st. Well, we like to think about go live dates as worth nothing. They're important, don't get me wrong, they're a milestone. But when you start to talk about TTV, which if any of you, and I think a lot of you on this call obviously are related to the onboarding experience, hence why you're here, one of the number one metric in onboarding is time to value. Time to value. It's not TTL, time to live. And I think that's where there's a big disconnect to this, and why when you have clients being onboarded multiple times, this has to be a very strong consideration that you're getting them to value as fast as possible. So value for any of you on this call is not live. It has to be live to start providing whatever it is to then drive the value. So it is an important piece of it, but really no one should be celebrating when it's live. Live is really nothing. And so we're going to unpack that a little bit more, but just think about that and how maybe these projects are managed right now. And then, of course, if you have to do this multiple times, again, live doesn't count. It's just the start. And so when it starts, then getting it to time to value, you need to be considering a lot of these elements so that you can quickly get to the demonstration point of value. Hey, I'll just give a use case of a client. You go live, but then you've already worked with the client to say, okay, if we go live this day, your average sales cycle is this, or onboarding is this, or whatever service you're providing with it, da 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 da. We should be able to demonstrate a very strong business case and ROI, initial ROI numbers by this date, 6 months out, 3 months out, 2 months out, whatever that is. That's really where you're getting to time to value. That's your time to value. So now the race in a multiple onboarding environment, because you are being tested, is you need to get them to that time to value as fast as humanly possible to demonstrate that. And then the client is then going to say, obviously, if you're doing a good job and you're hitting those numbers, okay, we want to expand this to another division team, or we want more seats, or I'd like to do another project, whatever it is. Then that's obviously onboarding number 2. And you hopefully going to get to onboarding 6 in that opportunity, right? So it's not time to live. It's time to value. Now, the word value in each one of these client relationships, you have to determine for them. So what your project, your service that you're selling, whatever it is, you have to define that with the client of what is the value. What do they see as the biggest thing they want to achieve by deploying your project, your service, your offering, whatever it is? What is that value? TTV. Have them define that for you when you're onboarding them the first time, and then carry that through. Make sense, everybody? Very critical piece to this multi onboarding environment, is because you have to show you can achieve value for them quickly so that you'll get to onboarding number 2, 3, and 4. If you're only onboarding the client once, probably there's a red dot there. Okay. Makes sense. So, okay, let's continue on. So with that said, we kind of look at, and not just us, this is kind of a combination of 24 years doing this and thousands of clients. Kind of comes down to these things, and some of these obviously can be expanded and contracted, but ultimately I like to think of it like this. So you got the initial activation, and again, whether it's a project, I don't care. We have tons of professional services projects. The kickoff, I don't care if you're selling product, you're selling service, you're selling whatever it is, and you're now onboarding that client to achieve the goal. These are all the considerations you have to think about. Enablement and adoption, the value expansion, and ongoing success and renewal. Again, some of you have been on many of my presentations. 30%, if not more, of renewal churn happens during onboarding. Now multiply that times 3 onboardings. If we do that, you're bearing a lot of risk with the onboarding hat. Okay. So this is why I kind of focus on a lot of these things. There's a lot of things to worry about, but the things you can control, you have meaningful change on. These are the areas we want to do that the most. So time to value, make sure you're hitting it, and then you'll get the other onboardings. All right. So we're going to break these down. And again, rip off and duplicate. I was just on the phone with a very large group in pharma. And what we were just kind of joking about is keep it simple, keep it direct, and measure, because that's how you're going to continue to win on these things. So let's break it down. So initial activation. So for many of you, this is when the handoff happens and it's being deployed into the actual setup or project kickoff or whatever it is. I will throw out a kind of a semi red dot item on this. The red dot item here would be more in the context of make sure your handoffs are good, because kind of a secret element of failure in onboarding is you start wrong foot with the client at the beginning. So make off your hand, there's other presentations we do and tips and tricks around the handoff and complexities of that. I'm not going to talk about that here today, but just make sure that's nip and tuck also, because that is kind of a driver to a lot of problems. But now, assuming you got that clear, then you get into where the onboarding is really going to begin. And this is really hard for a lot of clients, because it's probably the second thing is really probably the hardest part, and the third, but it's kind of the third is related to the second, right? So the first use case. So in the span of product offerings and services and software, the challenge is you have to break down, again, because the client is onboarding multiple times. You might be starting with a pilot, or you might be starting just in one area, or whatever it might be. What is the core first use case you're going to do for them, and how do you get that to high value, time to value, as quickly as possible? Because they might use your product for lots of things eventually over time, which again associates multiple onboardings. But right now, your primary objective is to get use case 1 successful in the shortest period of time, demonstrating the value to the customer, right? And so that's the initial activation, because you're not going to have any of those additional things if this doesn't go right. So you'd never get a second chance to make a first impression, right? Like, that's truly what this comes down to. And now the client is expecting that, because there's high risk. They don't trust you yet. There's no real relationship. So the proof is in the performance, right? And so this is something, again, when we're onboarding our own clients, like new clients, these are like, what can we ISO down to be the fastest to demonstrate value? Plus, then you understand our service better and our offering, which makes it easier for onboarding 2, 3, 4, and your continuation within the client ecosystem. All right, makes sense to everybody? So if you can try to identify those quick wins and get to that value, it's going to start then to unlock those opportunities of expanding, cross-selling, more use cases being deployed, project number 2, project number 3. But you got to get to something. How do I say this? Another way. When you onboard a new client, you own the clock starts and they're busy already. Like that person you're working with is already busy. They're not sitting around in their company saying, you know what, I got nothing going on. I would love to onboard a new product or service. No, they're saying I'm already really busy and now I need to, onboard this new product, service, whatever it is. So we're taking time from already a busy individual to try to help deploy an initiative. We got to make them look like a rock star and make them look like a rock star fast. And so that's kind of they're only going to give you so much time to really win. And so you just gotta, I know you're going to say, oh, we need this, but we also need that. We also need this. We also need that. Get it down to the smallest that it could possibly be to derive that value and then expand from there and grow from there. So it's a shift instead of the, anything and everything possible. It's what is needed to show initial wins. And that might take you a little bit of time to deconstruct for some of you on the call today, but the benefit is substantial. All right. So initial activation, because that's going to get you obviously onboarding 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Enablement and adoption. So depending on who you are on this call, if you're like a tech company with, and you got, CS teams and you're measuring stuff, okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's great. Many of you don't. And so kind of the joke earlier of like getting live, I don't care about. It's about getting to that first goal, which is TTV, time to value. And then from there, expanding and growing these things. So my number one thing, and where we've seen the greatest success, is really openly talking about expectations of performance, an impact of what your service or product is doing. So let's say you're a consultancy company and you come in and you say, okay, project 1, we're going to ISO to this offering that you do. We're going to do a study, research it, and then we're going to provide you actionable results that you can take and deploy. And after 2 months, we should see this kind of impact, a 12% reduction in cost of goods. Obviously, it's a fake project, but like that kind of spirit. So how you're laying that out and then measuring against that and then sharing the consistent performance around that. And some of it might be good information, some of it might be not, but it's all good information because now you're establishing trust, and then you'll get project 2, 3. If you're a software, obviously it's a little bit different. You can clearly measure many more things of rep adoption and of course whatever the value that you're supposed to do, like if it's an accounting product or whatever, you should by that time start to be seeing movement. Basically, you're not going to hit maybe the total ROI that you talked about in the initial sales process, but you should see some good trend lines and maybe some areas of opportunity to fix. That's okay. Like that's what the partnership with the client is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be working together and collaborating on success. Not everything is going to work right out the gate correctly, the best every single time. And don't set that expectation that it should. The expectation should be we're here to partner and work through this together, which is going to get you those better results, which is why the first deployment should be based on an actual goal and, like we talked about, time to value. Okay. Some of you are going to argue all day long with me of whether or not this is a CS function or an onboarding function. I don't care. It just should be done. If you're a team that has those 3 people, then all 3 people obviously are in our platform doing it. Or if you're a multi-hatter, you're doing all 3. And you just got to figure out what is, kind of the options on how you would want to do this. Most of the time, we don't really truly believe for a lot of our clients in QBRs, it's too late by then. You should be for enterprise accounts, or if you have accounts tier A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, your tier A's and your tier B's, they really don't need to have quarterly meetings or QBRs per se, because it should be more dynamic and real time with your teams, not daily or anything like that. But crescendo points quarterly really doesn't make a sense, and you're not really going to get the time and attention from the right people that many times a year unless you're building a deployment, north of $5 million. So think about that just kind of in your strategy plan here, just from all the experiences we see. But they all should be based off of real actionable numbers with the client. You're not going to tell the client, we see 24% seat adoption like that means nothing to them. It's irrelevant. That's information for you to know. What you're really more concerned about is they're only got 24% seat adoption because they're not seeing any damn value. It's not hitting the goal to which you sold them into. That's the problem. Fix that. The seat adoption will move. So enablement and adoption, okay, critical piece to really any type. Value expansion. So if you've done the first two correct, people should buy more. It's just reality. And so now you know how to get it initially up. You know you're going to be onboarding now into different teams and different environments. So it's critical to get that first one right. And now you're going to start to do that onboarding twice, third time. So a lot of groups kind of try to hide from this, quite frankly. So you sell a license for 100 seats or 50 seats or whatever it is, and they kind of onboard the first group of people, but then they're kind of like pretty lackadaisical on how they onboard additional people and or the problem that those people are trying to solve, because the problem might be a little bit different, especially if you have a product with a lot of different modules and lots of different things. So we're very adamant on making sure that you take the additional users who are coming through and their use cases and treat them with the same, might not be all of the things from adoption or onboarding one, but a lot of those things should be repeated for the additional users and different use cases that they're doing. So you have to kind of look at in your onboarding ecosystem, you have onboarding the client from onboarding zero, which is basically getting them set up. Many of those things in onboarding one are not needed, but many of the items as far as proving ROI, what use case they're leveraging it for, obviously what they're doing, et cetera, are needed. And so taking onboarding two as serious as onboarding one is very, very important, or zero in the use case I just said, because if you cut corners, then the same problems will happen as far as not meeting the goals, not getting time to value, not all those things again. So there has to be a repeatable and scalable way of doing that. All right. So that's phase three, the value expansion. This also, again, determines, it's obviously our tool is used by the sales team and onboarding NCS. But this is also the opportunity where you've proven your value on the initial. And so now you're getting into the ecosystem where you now can start to cross-sell and upsell. So you might be cross-selling, upselling the same service, the same offering, and just now getting more seats or more projects related to that. And or you might now have identified new services that you could generate. I was talking with another prospect this morning that had seven lines of services, 7 lines of revenue, and their toughest point is they only get the client in one of those siloed revenue areas, and they really struggle after they get onboarded to get them into additional revenue streams from their 6 other silos. And so now's the opportunity, because you have trust, you have ROI, to then begin to start to loop in additional services, not only sell more of what you sold them, but then also start to onboard them into additional service lines, which again is critical to that expansion for the LTV, lifetime value of each of your customers. So again, just thinking kind of strategically down the path, how these critical interactions through this initial onboarding can have great effect to the actual value of customer for you guys long term. Okay. Very good. Next one, ongoing and success. So I kind of talked about this a little bit more, and this is kind of related to cross sell, and they're all kind of intertwined, obviously, for many reasons, but probably the most important on this screen, I think, for me is the last one. It's the outcomes. Like, that's why they're buying. And the outcomes then establish that trust to then be able to identify more problems, which is the strategy session with the execs. And again, this is very popular model for professional services, obviously, because you got to hunt that next project, or you take them through kind of a vision map. Obviously, for technology companies, it's a no-brainer. That's the reason why you're a SaaS company, or product company, and that's the whole point. And so these things are pretty critical to kind of, the loop can only happen when you get to these points where you're then identifying the next. So there's 4 phases in them, obviously multiple different elements, but it's critical that for success on each one of them, is having defined goals and expectations to build that trust, return on value, ROI, or whatever it might be, reduction, which would of course be return, but you get my point. They have to be able to point to something of value so that you then can leverage that to then get onboarding 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 ongoing. So by embracing this approach, and quite frankly, you're being forced to. So it's whether or not you want to be successful, you have to embrace this approach because the clients are forcing it to happen, or you're losing deals, and maybe that's the reason why you're losing clients or churn is high. Is you have to approach this. Client trust and adoption deepens over time, and it's a continuous cycle that the clients then become familiar with because now they trust you. You're candid in the experience and the returns, and then you're being able to obviously do more onboardings and expand the deployment of the clients, overall. It becomes value led, right? So expansion becomes natural to the customer because they've been there, done that. And now they understand that you have a very good process of identifying problems, identifying expansion opportunities, and they now know what's coming. You're going to take them through repeatable and scalable processes, obviously, to expand that contract because it's coming. That's what they want. They want to be rock stars. You're helping them become more efficient, provide value. Whatever you're doing is working. So they're very excited about doing these future projects with you. And, and now they feel very comfortable about the process overall, right? And then ultimately, customers stay longer, right? And this is what is the greatest revenue effect for everybody. And we've done many presentations, and I'll include them in the follow-up, of how onboarding is a very, very there's a not a dotted line, a straight line to revenue from onboarding and these processes that we've talked about today, because they greatly affect churn, they greatly affect the scaling, which is obviously the cross sell and the upsell, and ultimately the economic value of the organization is substantially higher when you can demonstrate the ability to onboard a client, onboard them and spread the client, meaning spread within the account and grow within the account, and then spread additional services within the account. And so we have many clients that came to us, and clients were only using one piece of their services. We can rapidly get them to 2.3 to 3.2. I'm giving average numbers of services being leveraged by the client. And so obviously, how many onboardings are involved in that? A ton of them, right? And so the whole point of this presentation today was because we're having some conversations with current clients and also prospects, but we were talking about how many people they have on their team for onboarding and all this stuff. And they were talking about how busy everybody was. And it was because the ratio did not match the client count number like it used to. So you would be like, oh, we have 100 clients. We did 100 onboarding, or whatever. We sold 100 clients this year. We did 100 onboardings this year. No, they secured 100 clients and they did 425 onboardings this year. So they only secured 100, but they did more than 400 onboardings. And I was like, yeah, no, we see that all the time. And that's really where everything is moving. So for all of you today, maybe this hasn't hit you yet, or you're starting to see it, or you're struggling with it. This is where it's going. It's only going to keep expanding into those kind of ratios. So I think it was important to kind of discuss this, because there isn't, if your ratio is 1-to-1, there's probably opportunity, there, just being candid. All right. Real quickly, I'm just going to go through some things. So, okay, Joe, I drink the Kool-Aid. I understand what you're saying. Makes sense. Just quickly, I want to share kind of some things that kind of are from experiencers. So great. So how do we operationalize this? As I've been kind of hinting during the process, is just operationalizing this. And we help with many of our clients do this, but it's also good for you to kind of mind map some of these things, which is defining those life cycles, just like I've been saying. So, and many a times that's by client type, right? So what I mean by that, sometimes I over communicate and I apologize, but if you're a company selling into banks and healthcare systems, it's probably a little bit different. I know it is, it should be. The onboarding is going to be different. And so, okay, so then you're looking at by client type. For this point in time, just do it against one of them, banking, and then map out those experiences like I was just talking about, like what you onboarding one, time to value, what is it going to be? Typically, what is the first thing we're doing for them? Connecting account, whatever it is, I don't care. And then just map that out, literally 15 bullet points. That's going to give you kind of an idea. And then around that, what are the standard touch points, workflows, and things you want to achieve there? And then map that to the owners of that. Again, for some of you, you're all three or all four. That's fine, but just map that out. Takes you no more than, if you time clock yourself, this takes more than a half hour, you're making it too hard on yourself. Just do that right away. You're going to start to feel like, okay, this would be a way that I could prove to my company and myself that if we switch or think about changes here, I could generate a lot of value around this. You see what I'm doing here? Giving you the toolbook, the playbook to basically just do this against one of your client types or personas. So operationalize. And typically it's the bell curve. Don't worry about every little minute thing. 80% curve, home run, rocket, go for it. Don't worry about getting to 99% right now. Then figure out the centralized systems and just the processes that you might need to execute this. And obviously, duh, that's what we do. But again, all different kinds of companies and play time and place. But just think through, okay, what would I want it to be around here, and what would be the experiences around that? And I put in that coaching and refinement because we're very big on coaching and refinement, especially during onboarding and getting them to maximize the use of the product. Sometimes that's shifted to client success, but typically in an onboarding, you have 120 days. Most clients we see that are successful, plus clients not of ours, they don't go to CS till after the first 120 days, because CS can't possibly know all the intricate details during the onboarding, or maybe configurations of the client and everything like that. So most clientele we know with great success, onboarding, the onboarding team or implementation team owns the account for a minimum of 90 to 120 days before it goes to a CS ecosystem. So I don't know where you're at in that scale, but that's what I mean by this, is because there's trust, there's relationship, continuous coaching, making sure we're getting to that time to value that you want, right? So think about that kind of in this. Again, simple things that I think can help generate a lot of value for you. Next one, measure what matters. I think beating a horse here, but time to first value, we already addressed that. Obviously, if you're software enablement, but it really applies to all kind of groups. And then, of course, your renewal rates, all the other things that I've already highlighted, but make sure you're measuring against all of these. Don't just do stuff. Do stuff that matters, and that is basically making ROI for the customer. And then the stuff will all fall into place. Okay. And then real world examples. So just kind of playing it out, right? Like this is what you kind of want to see, you know. I was just using like a use case for us. Like you got 10 seats. A lot of times we sell into a single department first, onboarding or complex sales or account growth, right? But by applying that, you can reach 100 seats in 9 months. So if you're a software company you can start to map this out, right? And then you can judge how they're using the product, how many use cases they're deploying with. And then you can start to measure that instead of just selling this client the initial 10 seats, or maybe getting them to 30 seats this year, you're showing the company, I could get these guys to probably 100 seats a year if I'm just doing this continuous cycle and executing against the infrastructure around delivering that. That can be a huge bottom line difference for the organization, powered by onboarding, powered by that first 120 days post setup, because you're demonstrating that value, you're demonstrating the cross sell and the upsell capabilities to make more revenue. So that's kind of the spirit of that I really like to share, because that kind of changes somewhat. I'm hoping some of you are smiling. It changes the perception sometimes of onboarding as just to be something that has to get done to get them going, to where you can really unlock a lot of revenue and demonstrate a lot of value to the organization overall, because it is shifting and you're critical to the mission critical expansion on each client. So recap, customers are going to start with an extreme amount of caution. This is going to create an environment where you're going to have to onboard them a lot of times for success. Go live is not the finish line. Okay, that's critical. It's really where the rubber just hits the road. Sustained success, that's I think critical. And again, partnership with the customers, because you're going to onboard them a lot and they're going to start to tell you more of their problems, and you're going to find additional areas of opportunity within the account um, overall. So again, I appreciate everybody's time. I really try to focus on giving takeaway items that you're able to execute, with success. Um, I will say, and I ran a little bit longer than I normally do on it. Obviously, we have a platform called Engage that executes all of this. If you want to learn more, obviously you can schedule time. But a lot of the time, what I offer in my follow up is kind of a brainstorm. Many of you, I did two today. Many of you just want to brainstorm your environment, and you want to understand ideas around how to optimize and maximize this life cycle concept. You can obviously, I'll include my calendar, my personal calendar. It's not a demo, it's just literally a conversation to brainstorm. I'll include that in all the resources and the video of this today. So again, appreciate everybody's time. Look forward to our look at our upcoming ones. We got a lot of fun ones coming up, and good luck to you and yours here as we continue the work week. Thanks, everybody.